Chapter 811 There's no longer any hope. Even an official as righteous as Mark Sheppard was accused of committing a crime he did not commit. When the other higher-ups saw that, they were terrified as they understood why Zane did that in the first place. He was doing this to eliminate people who did not defer to him. At this moment, a bewitchingly beautiful woman entered the room. This woman named Harriet Lowe used to be a prostitute, but Zane was madly in love with her, to the extent of marrying her. Helplessly and in an attempt to preserve his dignity, Jerry could only claim outwardly that Harriet came from a noble, respectable family. She also became Zane's personal secretary. "Honey, Philin is ready to go to war. Our king has also made an announcement saying that Diatorin will face them head-on," Harriet whispered. Zane was shocked. He knew his father as a cowardly man who would not propose starting a war, but now the king had announced that they would be facing their enemies head-on. Something was obviously off with that. Having a bad premonition, Zane waved impatiently and announced that the meeting would end. Relieved, the other higher-ups left the meeting venue immediately. Only after everyone else's departure did Zane ask, "What exactly happened? Why did they start a war against each other?" "How would I know? You should give your dad a call and ask what's up with that," Harriet said. Zane nodded and called the landline in the king's bedroom. The moment the call went through, he asked immediately, "What's happening, Dad? Why is the king suddenly announcing that we'll go to war?" This call took Avon by surprise. He knew that Jerry had 2 sons, but he could not tell one's voice from the other. "The king of Philrin wants to start a war. It's not something I can control," he said helplessly. "This war can't start, Dad. If the 2 countries go to war, the 4 champions will surpass our family in terms of status. Perhaps they all want Caspian to be restored to his former post too. This will put us at a disadvantage," Zane said, irritated. "The king is still here with us, so what's there to fear? Return to the king's residence quickly. As long as we can still hold him hostage, we won't need to worry about anything." Avon was worried that he would make a mistake if he spoke too much, so he quickly ended the call after a few simple sentences. "Something's not right, honey. Watch this." As Harriet spoke, she played a video of the king's live broadcast. Zane took a look. The king appeared to be energetic on-screen, completely unlike someone who was under control. "Crap, our family is done for. Our comfortable days are coming to an end, honey," Zane screamed, looking absolutely crushed. "Huh? How's that possible? Didn't you just talk to your dad? He'd surely tell you if something's wrong." Harriet noticed that something was not right, but she did not expect the problem to be that serious. "We can never go back there. We'll look for a safe place and hide there. Maybe the person who talked to me over the phone just now wasn't even Dad. That's why his voice sounded weird to me." Zane was panicking. He had sensed that something was not right on the phone earlier. He suddenly felt like the Andrews family was in deep trouble. It felt like they were being manipulated by a pair of big, invisible hands. "Don't you have a friend who's in Astronia now? Perhaps we can seek refuge with him," Harriet whispered. That made Zane somewhat displeased. Harriet had served a plethora of men, including that friend of his, who often sought Harriet out back then. Zane had also heard some rumors that Harriet was having an affair with him. Seeking refuge with that friend now was basically equivalent to giving his wife to him, was it not? Up when Harriet saw Zane's expression, she said coquettishly, "We're in difficult times now. Where has your mind gone to? I'm already yours, so why would you care about other people? No matter what, I'll only love you and you alone." Zane did not believe in Harriet's words at all, but it seemed that he had no decent choice at this point in time. Helpless, he could only have his subordinates arrange for his escape to Astronia. Kelvin, who knew that the Andrews family was about to be done for, was rushing to the airport together with a dozen guards who were also holding Macy hostage. "Mort, escort Sherry to my car. The other cars will follow after mine," Kelvin shouted. Macy whispered to Mort, "He's a traitor now. You have to think it through. If you follow the orders of a traitor, the rest of your life will be over." "Don't worry, Godma. I'll protect you no matter what, but we should go with it for now and see what happens after," Mort said. He had been looked down on by many other people, and that was why he felt like Sherry was the person who was the nicest to him. Jethro headed to the guards' headquarters to treat his wounds. However, when he left, he realized that all the guards were gone. Only now did he realize what had happened. Kelvin had escaped. Enraged, he cursed vehemently, "Kelvin, you bastard! I told you such important news and yet you abandoned me and ran away." Jethro knew that he had to latch on to Kelvin, as Kelvin had the trump card named Sherry in his hands. He would only have a chance at survival if he was with Kelvin. Without much thought, he rushed to the garage in the basement. At this moment, he heard the sound of an engine revving, which made a grin bloom on his face. Has Kelvin not departed yet? At that thought, Jethro took off into a run toward the direction of the noise. However, when he reached a junction and saw the car, he was left dumbfounded. Unexpectedly, the people who exited the car were Jet and his mentees, followed by a large team of Life Force members. Jethro already knew that Jet was actually Caspian under disguise, so he dared not act rashly. Kelvin should have gotten away already. Take some men with you and search the premises. Also, seize someone and ask them about the next steps of Kelvin's plans, Caspian said in a low tone. Sylvia nodded. She was disguised as one of Jet's mentees, so she had to listen to his orders. You guys search this place thoroughly, Sylvia commanded her men immediately. These members of Life Force had disliked the guards since long ago. Naturally, they were happy to see the guards so undignified. Upon witnessing this scene, Jethro dared not stay any longer. He turned tail and ran. Caspian and the others did not spot Jethro. Caspian had assumed that Jethro had escaped together with Kelvin. Panicked, Jethro quickly ran to the hidden chamber in the guards' headquarters and closed the door tightly. He was terrified and completely at a loss about what he should do next. Also, he could not just stay here as he would end up dead anyway if he was discovered. Chapter 812, Trying to Stay Afloat. The two villagers who had come to expose the secrets they knew were locked up here in the chamber. Their bodies were littered with wounds and covered in blood. They were staring at Jethro intently. Under normal circumstances, Jethro would have been fine with that, but now, he found them to be terrifying. One of the villagers said viciously, Jethro Roman, you bastard, are you hiding here because someone else is after you? Jethro was enraged by his words. He did not want these men to continue their loud spiel as he would be done for if he was discovered. I didn't expect the two of you to still be alive. Perhaps I can do this. I can kill you both now so that you won't have to suffer from all that pain. Jethro picked up a piece of iron that was red after being heated up. He planned to kill the two men. The other villager said hurriedly, Don't come over here. What are you doing? I'll scream for help, believe it or not. They had never given up on their survival. It seemed that Jethro had encountered a serious problem, and it proved to be a great opportunity for them. Jethro said viciously, I can kill the two of you now. Right at this moment, they heard someone knock on the door. Jethro's expression darkened as he whispered threateningly, You'd better be obedient, or I'll kill you too. The villagers dared not act rashly. They were afraid of angering Jethro, but at the same time they hoped that the people outside would break in and save them. Stop knocking. This room has been abandoned for a long time, and it's been empty for as long, one of the guards said. Another replied, Abandoned? But this lock is new. Perhaps there are some treasures inside? How naive of you. How could there still be treasures in this run-down place? The guards have run away long ago. They'd never leave anything valuable here. I think something is wrong with this place. This lock is new, which means they're definitely hiding something here. As the guards argued with each other, Sylvia walked over asking, What are you guys squabbling about? Without hesitation, she shot the lock open with her gun. Meanwhile, Caspian walked over as well. After they entered the chamber, they discovered that this was a secret base for the specific purpose of executing people. It could be proved by the execution equipment lying around. Jethro hid in the corner, shaking involuntarily out of fear. He said, still harboring hopes that he could survive, Caspian, I was coerced too. Killing me won't impact the Andrews family in any way. As long as you can ensure my safety, I can take you to Kelvin and the others. The Andrews family is no longer as powerful as they were. Do you think I'd still need you? Caspian looked at Jethro coldly. Kelvin has taken your mother, Sherry Lynch. If you release me, I'll tell you their escape plans. Jethro was desperate to prove his value. If he failed to do so, Caspian would surely kill him without hesitation. When the Life Force members heard Jethro call their head Caspian, they assumed that Jethro was scared witless. On the other hand, the two villagers who were locked up felt hope ignite in them upon hearing Caspian's name. You won't just watch as other people die, will you? There are two innocent people here. If you don't release me, I'll kill them immediately. Jethro knew that he had no other choice, so he could only take the plunge and threaten Caspian with the lives of those two people. You're still considered a powerful figure, aren't you, Jethro? Don't you feel ashamed when you use such unscrupulous methods? Caspian said with a frown. Jethro would really stop at nothing just to make sure he stayed alive. Do you think trying to rile me up would work? I'm gonna die anyway, so what use do I have for my dignity? Release me and you'll save 2 lives, which is a good deal for you. Without any other choice, Jethro could only try to survive through this. You sure do have good ideas, don't you, old bastard? A member of Life Force said. Scum like you aren't worthy of being killed by me, Jethro. Caspian waved his hand in the air, gesturing for the men from Life Force to open a path. The men frowned. Since when was their head so benevolent? In the past, he would never care about the lives of these two men. Jethro froze as well. He never dreamed of Caspian releasing him for real. He held the two villagers hostage as they walked slowly to the door. Caspian said coldly, "When you leave the headquarters, you must release these two men or I'll surely make your life hell." His words made a chill run down Jethro's spine. He did not say anything and continued making his way forward. Sylvia wanted to chase after them, but Caspian stopped her. She asked, "Are we really going to release him, sir?" Caspian said nonchalantly, "He can't escape us. Let him live for a few more hours." Sylvia pursued anxiously, "Jethro, that old bastard's words can't be trusted, sir. What if he refuses to release the two men?" "Don't worry. He has nowhere else to go. He'll probably run for his life, and he'll go to Kelvin the first second he can, which is a good thing as far as we're concerned," Caspian replied. Sylvia had a realization. If Jethro wanted to escape, he would surely look for someone he could rely on. In the process, he would basically be showing Caspian sighed where to go. "Let's go," Caspian said. Sylvia dashed out immediately. As expected, they saw the two villagers walking over while supporting each other. They were now safe. "Show them somewhere they can have a rest," Caspian said. "We're fine, Lord Caspian. You should chase after Kelvin Andrews. He and his people have taken Ms. Lynch to the airport. They've made plans to seek refuge in Astronia," one of the villagers said with gritted teeth. "Where did you hear this from?" Sylvia asked, confused. "They were discussing this in the chamber," the villager explained. "Could this be a fake lead, sir?" Sylvia asked worriedly. "I'll head to the airport now while you stay in the king's residence and wipe out the remaining enemies," Caspian ordered immediately. He had to act now. He had to seize Kelvin and escort him back before he could escape. "Don't worry, Lord Caspian." Sylvia bowed to Caspian. The members of Life Force were shell-shocked. Caspian and Sylvia tore their masks down, not bothering to keep up their disguises anymore. "You..." The mentees stared at Sylvia and Caspian in shock. They would never expect Caspian to disguise himself as their head. "If you join our side now, I can ensure your survival," Sylvia said immediately. The men were not stupid. Their side no longer had an advantage, and they did not want to die just like that. On the roads leading to the airport, several SUVs were traveling at high speed. Kelvin was in one of them. Chapter 813, Fast and Furious. Macy sat in the back, with Mort at her left. At her other side was a bald man who called himself Ronald Houston. He appeared to be very strong at first glance. He had to be a martial artist. "Can you drive a bit slower? I feel a bit carsick," Macy said to the driver with a frown. "Or you can change seats with me, and open the window for some fresh air. You might feel better," Mort said. "You don't need to pay her any attention. Drive at full speed," Kelvin said from the passenger seat in front. He would never waste any time in this place. He had to arrive at the airport as soon as possible. "Shut up, Mort! Do you think so highly of yourself?" Ronald said viciously. "What do you want?" Mort suddenly said. "Are you trying to rebel against us?" Ronald slapped Mort across the face. Mort was furious. He had wanted to stop working for the Andrews family since a long time ago, but he could only stay here as he had no other choice. He gave Macy a meaningful look before suddenly opening the car door. He leaped out of the car and shouted, "Godma, run!" Macy froze for a while before following suit. As the car was driving too fast, they ended up rolling on the ground for a few moments after jumping out of it. Thankfully, there was some shrubbery at the side which they collapsed on. The shrubbery served as a cushion for their fall. "Are you okay, Godma?" Mort asked in concern. Macy said, "I'm fine. You should run now, quick. Stay here any longer and they're going to catch up to us." Right after she said that, they heard a sequence of gunshots from afar. Evidently, Kelvin's men were riled up now. "I've never mistreated you or anything, have I, Mort? Why would you do something like this?" Kelvin said exasperatedly. After exiting the car, he rushed toward where Mort was with his men. "Stop talking to him. Quick, escape through the shrubbery and don't look back. Try looking for reinforcements," Macy said hurriedly. There was little time left for her to make a decision. She was certain that she would be able to escape, but dealing with Kelvin would be a bit more difficult. Although Mort initially hesitated, he was already a distance away. He got shot once as he ran. In order to protect Mort, Macy gave up on escaping. "That's it! Stop chasing after them! Let's leave now," Kelvin ordered. All the wealthy businessmen in Diatoran were terrified after Filrin declared war against Diatoran. They were prepared to seek asylum in other countries for now. Zane and his family mingled with them. Harriet was dressed to the nines although they were fleeing the country, while Zane wore ordinary clothes. Beautiful women did tend to have special privileges. Harriet could just flaunt her beauty casually and others would come over to impress her. She had reaped numerous benefits using her beauty. She just needed to act coquettishly and many people would rush over to offer her help. Harriet had a bad reputation, but she no longer cared about that. She quickly grew close to a rich young man called Cash Golding. Cash's family ran a multinational business and had hundreds of billions to their name. For someone like Cash, fleeing Diatoran simply meant living his carefree life in another country. After they got to know each other better, Cash took Harriet to his car as he wanted to have sex with her there. When Zane discovered that, they were already all over each other. Cash exclaimed exasperatedly, "What are you doing, asshole? Can't you see that I'm enjoying myself over here?" Due to the ordinary clothes Zane had on, Cash did not know of his identity at all. Zane spat out the words, "You should leave now, Miss Harriet. Your husband will be furious if he learns about this." Harriet would never have dreamed of doing this when Zane was still in power. Only a few days had passed since then, but Harriet was already all over another man while in front of him. If they went to Astronia, Harriet would definitely cheat on him time after time. "What, you're already married?" Cash asked in surprise. "It's the same either way, isn't it? I still have to flee the country all the same," Harriet said exasperatedly while glaring at Zane. "Fuck! We wouldn't be in this state if not for the Andrews family," Cash said angrily. The Golding family had been running their business well, but they could only choose to flee the country because of the Andrews family. "What if we do this, pretty lady? You'll come with me, and I'll marry you. Also, this servant is so annoying. You should order him to fuck off," Cash said crossly. That enraged Zane thoroughly, and he hauled Cash out of the car. Cash was shocked. He was only an ordinary rich man with little bravery to speak of. Unexpectedly, Harriet came forward and gave Zane a resounding slap on the face. Harriet had made herself appear weak, so Zane did not expect this slap to be so hard, to the extent of making him feel dizzy. "You'd better be obedient, or I'll make sure that your reputation is torn to shreds," Harriet threatened viciously. Zane gritted his teeth in resentment upon hearing that. However, he had no choice now but to watch as Harriet engaged in those shameless acts with another man. Dax was feeling anxious. He was worried that the Florinian army would launch a sneak attack on them, so he wanted to be on the offensive. He dared not act without permission though. He could only ask Caspian, "Filrin is eager to strike. Should we do anything about it, Lord Caspian?" Caspian was heading to the airport in Dord City. On the monitor in front of him were several moving targets. The GPS system captured the situation at the Diatoranian borders clearly. "Wait on the spot for now. Filrin won't attack rashly. Even if they do attack, there's nothing to fear. They're only a group of uncoordinated soldiers," Caspian said. He did not even see the Florinian army as a worthy opponent. "I have a difficult question to ask, Lord Caspian. After everything is dealt with in Dord City, are you available to command the army in West Eredlands?" Dax asked respectfully. Dax was not confident that he could win this war. He had no desire to achieve greatness either. He just wanted to ensure that he would stay in his position as champion. This was because he knew that he would never surpass Caspian. He had an idea about his abilities. He knew that he would not command an army as competently as Caspian when fighting in a war of this scale. "I have an emergency to attend to here, so I have to head to the airport. Send a jet over here, and I'll rush over to West Eredlands after I'm done here. Also, keep this a secret. Make sure that no one knows that I'll be heading over," Caspian said. Only after hearing his words did Dax feel relieved. Immediately after their conversation, Lena called. She said hurriedly, "Why is your number always busy, Lord Caspian?" Caspian was stunned. "Was the king in danger?" he asked. "Why? Do you need me for anything?" Lena said. "The king wants to head over to West Eredlands to oversee the battle. He's about to get on the plane now." Chapter 814, Fleeing to Another Country. Caspian was stunned when he heard that, and it proved to be a difficult issue to solve. The fact that the king wanted to head to the front lines now was bad news. "No matter what, you must stop the king from going to West Eredlands," Caspian said firmly. Lena was helpless. "How would I dare to, Lord Caspian? I don't care. This is an order. Almost everything in Dord City is settled now, so you must stop the king," Caspian said, refusing to answer that question. "If anything happens, I'll take up the responsibility for it." Caspian ended the call and quickly called Avon. He asked, going straight to the point. "Where are you, Avon?" "I've left Dord City and am about to seek the king out," Avon answered. Caspian said hurriedly, "Return to Dord City and go to the airport immediately with the Inspector General's office to arrest Kelvin. He's taken Macy with him, and he plans to flee from the country." "Yes, Lord Caspian, I'll do so right away." Avon dared not treat this carelessly. Lena felt anxious after the call had ended. She had no idea how she could stop the king. Just as the king was about to board the plane, she said to Lyndon, "Chief Gorp, I just got off a call with Lord Caspian." Lena's sudden statement confused Lyndon. She continued candidly, "He said that we must stop the king from going to West Eredlands." She knew that there was no way she could do it alone, so she could only start from Lyndon. After hearing her words, Lyndon understood Caspian's good intentions. He said, "Got it. You'll carry out the plan while I'll assist you. Even if His Majesty ends up holding us accountable, I'll shoulder half of the blame." Meanwhile, Balthazar called to them, "What are you two still doing there? We're getting on the plane soon." When Austin saw the king of Diatoran appear in front of the public, he was of the opinion that the king had already been rescued. Theo disagreed though. He insisted that the king had not yet escaped from danger. Just as the two of them were arguing in the headquarters of Skyark Palace, they heard wave after wave of tormented screams outside. They rushed out hurriedly, only to see a group of women pursuing and killing the members of Skyark Palace. These women were all wearing black leather jackets. They wielded daggers and had poisonous glares. Austin got ready to fight back. However, someone slit his throat before he could strike. Theo was dumbfounded. He wanted to escape, but he was killed as well. Now, Skyark Palace had become a complete mess. Everyone ran away in all directions, trying to leave Skyark Palace. But what awaited them was a storm of cold and unfeeling bullets. They were given no chance to escape before being shot to death. They never expected their lives to end so disastrously when they took control of the king's residence. The security in Dord City Airport was suddenly tightened exponentially. These were extraordinary times, and a war was about to break out at the borders. The security guards dared not treat the situation frivolously. At this moment, an SUV suddenly sped into the airport. Before everyone could react, several more SUVs barged in as well. A group of people exited the cars armed with guns and weapons. They started a massacre in the airport. Of course, the security guards would not just stand and watch. However, they only had electric batons with them and not firearms. Due to the disparity in their weapons, the guards were powerless against those men. Kelvin got out of the car slowly. Ronald and an old man trailed behind him, holding Macy hostage. "All right, get on the plane as soon as possible. Don't waste any more time here," Kelvin said. He just wanted to leave Diatoran now. He did not want to waste too much time on something so meaningless. Looking at the dead bodies on the floor, Macy felt murderous. She wanted to kill Kelvin. At this moment, a heavily injured Jethro dashed toward him, saying, "How shameless can you be, Kelvin? You're thinking of abandoning me and fleeing the country. I looked for you for a long time, Mr. Roman. I thought you had fled long ago," Kelvin said with a smile. "Really? Do you really think I'd believe you? Hand Ms. Lynch to me." Jethro grabbed Macy and said viciously, "Everyone else, hijack the plane." Ronald knew that Jethro was powerful, but he did not fear Jethro now, not when he was so heavily injured. He stepped forward and punched Jethro in the face. The old man named Leroy White struck at this moment too. Jethro's expression darkened. To everyone's surprise, he flicked a pill toward Ronald's mouth. Ronald, who was not on guard at all, swallowed the pill. He asked, terrified, "What the hell was that? Would you believe that it's a multivitamin pill? As long as you do what I say, you'll be fine. I promise," Jethro said maliciously. Leroy wanted to sneak up on Jethro, but Jethro had already pulled Macy to stand in front of him. He was using her as a shield, so Leroy could only stop. After all, Macy served as their protective charm. At this moment, Jethro flicked another pill into Leroy's mouth. After swallowing the pill, Leroy's features twisted into a frown. "Now that these two useless fellows are currently under my control, they should serve more of a purpose, shouldn't they, Mr. Kelvin?" Jethro said with a grin. Kelvin was at a loss for how to deal with Jethro now. With how cunning Jethro was, letting him stay by Kelvin's side was basically like putting a time bomb beside him. "It so happens that there's a medium-sized passenger aircraft here, Mr. Kelvin. It should be sufficient. We're already holding the pilots hostage." Two guards walked over, holding two pilots hostage. "Great, we can take off now," Kelvin said as he headed toward the tarmac. At this moment the roar of an engine could be heard in the airport. A Jeep Wrangler barged into the airport. At the same time, someone leaped high into the air while holding a submachine gun. "Crap, it's Caspian!" Jethro yelled, grabbing Macy. Macy was basically his protective shield now. Caspian was not wearing a disguise. There was no longer any need to. Kelvin had already hidden himself among the crowds. While mingling with the throng, he ordered, "Fuck! Attack him! Hit him as hard as you can!" The guards were naturally afraid upon seeing Caspian. They lost all courage and could no longer fight back. Caspian killed many guards after firing a magazine of bullets. Kelvin screamed as he hid behind a car. "Are you abandoning your mother, Caspian?" "Kelvin, the Andrews family is no longer as powerful as it was before. If you surrender now, I can spare you," Caspian said coldly. "Do you think I'm that stupid, Caspian? With all the crimes I committed, my death is inevitable. I might as well go all out," Kelvin shouted loudly. "It seems that you insist on walking to your death. I'll make your dream come true then." Chapter 815, The Ironclad Pass. Just as Caspian was about to strike, several guards working for the Andrews family seized some security guards at the airport. Kelvin threatened Caspian. "Caspian, put your gun down immediately or I'll kill them." He just wanted to leave this place quickly without wasting too much time on Caspian. Caspian knew that Kelvin had gone mad. Innocent people would be harmed if he did not do as Kelvin said. Avon rushed in with a group of people from the Inspector General's office. "I showed up on time, right, Lord Caspian?" Caspian's appearance alone had already made Kelvin's life difficult. Now that so many people from the office had shown up, Kelvin was completely at a loss for what to do. "Get on the plane immediately!" Kelvin yelled. He rushed toward the tarmac under the protection of his guards. With a wave of Avon's hand, the people from the office went after them. Avon shouted, "You have nowhere to go now. Surrender immediately. If anyone fires, I'll kill her." Jethro picked up a dagger and lodged it at Macy's neck. Kelvin yelled, "She's Caspian's mother. Who dares act rashly? Show me!" Macy was his only source of protection now, after all. The men from the office quickly took a few steps back as they dared not injure Lord Caspian's mother. Jethro shouted, "Caspian, you'd better retreat along with your men or I'll take action now." Caspian said indifferently, "You're doing this because you're desperately trying to stay alive. Surrender immediately, and you'll get to die with your body intact." "Start the plane now," Kelvin yelled. The engine started with a roar. Kelvin and the others made a beeline toward the plane. Jethro wanted to escape as well, but Macy snuck up on him when he was distracted and pierced his heart with a dagger. Jethro yelled in pain. As he attempted to struggle despite his wound, Caspian's palm landed on him. Caspian dragged Macy toward him at the same time. Ronald and Leroy suddenly fired. Caspian pulled Macy into his arms, and they rolled on the floor for a while. Meanwhile, the men from the office killed both Ronald and Leroy. Caspian and Macy were still holding each other tightly, with Macy's legs around Caspian's waist. Caspian felt resigned. If Willow were here, he would not be able to explain this to her. Kelvin and the others got onto the plane, which taxied out and took off at record speed. "What a pity, we let Kelvin escape," Macy said regretfully as she looked up at the plane in the air. "He can't escape. He'll explode into dust soon after," Caspian said casually. Right after he said that, one of the newest fighter jets in Diatoran appeared in the air and fired a missile that exploded Kelvin's plane. "Can you let go of me now?" Caspian suddenly said. Macy flushed. She quickly pushed Caspian away, saying exasperatedly, "It was too dangerous just now, so I..." She knew that her explanation was flawed. She just enjoyed the feeling of being in Caspian's arms. The king showed up after the explosion. Lena and Lyndon followed him silently. Upon noticing the king's appearance, the men from the office surrounded him. Caspian quickly went over as well. He asked, "How is the process of your recovery going, Your Majesty?" Balthazar laughed. "I'm not as fragile as you all think. I wanted to head over to the front lines at West Eredlands, but they insisted on stopping me," he said exasperatedly, turning back to look at Lena and Lyndon. Balthazar would have dealt with the two of them had this happened before. However, he knew that they were doing this for his sake. He should not incriminate them because of this. Caspian said guiltily, "I told them to do that. If you have to punish someone, please punish me." Balthazar laughed. "And I wondered why they were so bold. It's because you have their backs. The situation over at West Eredlands is dire, Your Majesty. When the war starts, both sides will deploy millions of soldiers. Also, you have to supervise the overall situation." Balthazar said nothing, so Caspian continued, "Although we've dealt with the Andrews family, we don't know how many spies they've inserted in our midst. After the war starts, we have to deal with the feuds within our own country. When we have enemies both within and outside of the country, we can't afford to be careless. You want me to stay in Dord City while you head over to West Aridlands, don't you? Balthazar asked. Caspian nodded. Precisely. Only when you're supervising the overall goings-on in Dord City can we charge forward on the front lines without fear. Diatoran is so lucky to have such a great general as you, Caspian. I hereby announce that you're restored to your original position. Balthazar patted Caspian's shoulder, looking emotional. I can't be restored now, Your Majesty. If Filren gets word about it, they'll order a military retreat, Caspian said. Balthazar knew what Caspian meant. He nodded, feeling gratified. Do whatever you want to do, Caspian. I'll support you wholeheartedly. I'll bestow upon you an ironclad pass, Balthazar said. An ironclad pass? What's that? Caspian was confused. He did not know what the king meant. What was an ironclad pass? With this ironclad pass, you don't need to listen to my orders during special circumstances, Balthazar said with a chuckle. You can't bestow this upon me, Your Majesty. No precedent exists for this in Diatoran, Caspian said in alarm. With this, Balthazar was basically allowing Caspian to rule Diatoran alongside him. Balthazar feigned displeasure. Why? Are you about to go against my orders again? As your subordinate, I'm obligated to listen to your orders, Your Majesty. I don't need this pass, Caspian said. Lena has told me about everything that has happened recently, Caspian. You had already occupied the capital of Filren. You would have successfully taken it down had I not been controlled by Jerry, that old bastard. I won't let something like this happen again. I feel regretful every time I think about it. There wouldn't have been so much trouble if you had this ironclad pass, Balthazar said. Noticing how determined Balthazar was, Caspian could not very well refuse again. He bowed to Balthazar, saying, Thank you, Your Majesty. I'll head over to the front lines now. Please announce the restoration of my position after the war has commenced. Chapter 816, A Beautiful Woman's Fantasies. When Avon and Macy walked over, Balthazar said to them with a smile, Diatoran will surely become stronger with the two of you here. I'll commit your great services to memory, and I'll reward you handsomely after everything comes to an end. I'll grant both of you a wish. Macy was elated. A request appeared in her mind, and she asked shyly, Would any wish do, Your Majesty? Balthazar looked at Macy. He still had a somewhat vague impression of her. He answered with a chuckle, As long as it's something within my abilities, of course. If you want a star in the sky, then I'm sorry. I can't do that. Macy's wish was to be Caspian's wife, but she dared not say it out loud. My wish will be a reasonable one, Your Majesty, she answered with a grin, and the topic was soon skipped over. Sherry and Willow, who were currently in Massey residence, were worried sick about Caspian's safety. It was to the extent of being unable to eat or sleep well. When they heard the good news, they were finally relieved. This is great! Caspian will surely have time now. And the two of you. Zoe trailed off meaningfully. What are those thoughts you always have in your mind? Willow said exasperatedly. Zoe grinned. I'll be the kid's godmother. Of course I'd be waiting eagerly. Willow whispered, Is Caspian about to return soon, Mr. Massey? Caspian still had not met Logan using his identity as Logan's son, but Logan was already Willow's father-in-law in her heart. Logan answered, He probably won't be back until a couple of days later. The situation is dire at West Aridlands. He'll surely have to command the army over there. Dax was making plans in front of a map spread open in his office when a deputy general came over and whispered to him, Champion Santos, Lord Caspian is here. Dax smiled for the first time in a long time. Where is he? He's in a cave nearby, Dax asked hurriedly. Why? Why not invite him here? His subordinates were so irresponsible. How could they let Lord Caspian stay in a cave? The deputy general said helplessly, He wants you to lead all the other deputy generals to that cave. He's going to hold a meeting there. Dax's confusion was evident on his face. He had no idea about Caspian's intentions, but he dared not go against what Caspian wanted. In said cave in the West Aridlands war zone, Caspian was looking at his laptop with a serious expression. Meanwhile, Lena and Macy were standing guard in front of the cave. Caspian asked, Macy, where's Sylvia? How long does she need until she can reach here? She said she needed 2 more hours. I don't know why she always takes so much time, really, Macy said exasperatedly. We won't wait for her then. Let's discuss the subsequent battle plans, Caspian said. In the cave, 8 people were sitting on the ground, facing each other. Caspian stood in the middle while everyone else waited for him to announce his strategies. Caspian said indifferently, I've already decided that this war between us and Filren must be ended within a time frame as short as possible. It'll be ideal if we can manage to win the war within 3 to 5 days. His words surprised everyone else though. Thinking about it, winning a war involving the deployment of millions of soldiers was impossible. Filren has millions of soldiers, Lord Caspian. The latest intel we got was about how Filren purchased massive amounts of modern weaponry from Vedetia. Dax analyzed the current situation. He was of the opinion that Caspian's plan was somewhat hasty and premature. We have nothing to fear. We have modern weapons as well. If we act fast enough, they won't have any time to react, Caspian replied indifferently. The intel Dax told him just now was not a threat at all, as far as Caspian was concerned. Looking at how calmly confident Caspian was, Dax was relieved. He chose to believe in Caspian, as the general had never lost a single war before. Champion Santos, have the intelligence department prepare a set of obsolete military communication equipment. The equipment is often made obsolete because they aren't safe enough. Why would you need something outdated? Dax asked, confused. I'm doing this on purpose. Otherwise, how would the enemy manage to eavesdrop on confidential information from our side? The others immediately had an approximate idea of Caspian's intentions. It seemed that he was planning to leak false intel to Filren so as to disrupt Filren's plans. This plan was risky though. They could not say for sure if the other party would choose to believe in what they had eavesdropped on. Lena, infiltrate the enemy troops with your men, and try to make sure that they'll hack into our equipment. I have a requirement though. You must ensure that they won't become suspicious, Caspian ordered. Everyone looked at Lena. They all knew that her mission was an important one. Lena smiled and said nothing. She had completed hundreds of infiltrative missions, and had grown to be exceptionally adept at them. You have another mission, which is to spread rumors among the enemy troops. They need to think that I've reached West Aridlands in secret and am planning to supervise the military operation myself. At the same time, spread another rumor about how I'm seriously ill in the aftermath of Jerry's rebellion and am receiving treatment in Dord City. Time is of the essence, so embark on your mission now, Caspian said. Lena stood up and saluted Caspian. Yes, Lord Caspian, I'll be sure to complete my missions. Anything you need, Captain Lena, just tell me and I'll work alongside you with all I have, Dax proclaimed. Lena's missions were very important, so naturally, he would support her during the process. Thank you, Champion Santos. I'll make a list before seeking you out, Lena said with a nod before leaving the cave. When Macy saw how confident Lena was, she felt a pang of jealousy in her heart. Caspian had assigned such important missions to Lena, in an obvious sign of his trust in her. Macy waited eagerly for Caspian to assign a mission to her, or at least allow her participation. Macy, Caspian called. His voice made Macy come back to her senses. She stood up immediately. I'm here, Lord Caspian. I have an extremely important mission for you. You must monitor the King of Filren closely and seize him when he tries to escape, Caspian said loudly. Caspian's orders excited Macy. This mission seemed to be more important than the others. If not for the other people present, she would have gone forward and kissed Caspian. At this moment, many thoughts flashed past in Macy's mind. Did Caspian assign such an important mission to me because I've always been his loyal follower, or is it because of something else? What if he wants something else from me? He already has a wife. Chapter 817, Surprising Actions. What? Do you have anything to say about that? Caspian asked Macy, who was spacing out. Macy froze for a moment before blushing. She said apologetically, No, nothing. I'll complete my mission. You sure? Caspian asked. This was the first time Macy had spaced out during such an important meeting. Her mission was very important, and Caspian did not want anything to be amiss. I'm sure. Macy nodded emphatically. Caspian stopped worrying once he noticed the determination burning in Macy's gaze. Right at this moment, they heard rapid footsteps coming from outside. Macy's and Caspian's gazes met. They reached the same conclusion. Sylvia was here. Everyone glanced in the direction of the sound, and sure enough, Sylvia was walking briskly toward them. She took huge steps at a time. Sylvia had been carrying out a mission somewhere else, but Caspian had summoned her over to the cave anyway. It was because he was used to her presence, and also because he found it easy to make use of her as a general who had already been working with him for a long time. With such a large-scale operation ahead of him, Caspian thought of Sylvia almost immediately. Lord Caspian, I'm not late, am I? Sylvia asked hurriedly the moment she entered the cave. The meeting has already ended. What are you even here for? Macy asked sarcastically. It's fine if you want to be impolite to me under normal circumstances, but we're fighting a war now. Have a clear idea about where you stand, at least. Sylvia was a general officer after all. Of course she would be annoyed upon hearing Macy's sharp remarks. Fine, fine. You're a general officer after all. I have to complete my mission, so I won't spend more time talking to you. Macy saluted Caspian and Dax before turning to leave. Look at her, Lord Caspian, she's so impolite, Sylvia said, enraged. Sylvia, you'll be the frontline leader starting from today. You'll lead a squad that will station itself near Mount Dre Solaris. Yes, Lord Caspian, Sylvia answered. Caspian asked, Champion Santos, how many people can the air raid shelter at the foot of Mount Dre Solaris accommodate at most? The shelter is huge, Lord Caspian. It can accommodate 300,000 to 400,000 soldiers with no problem, Dax said. We have about 1 million soldiers in total, so they'll have to split up before surrounding the enemy together. Caspian formulated strategies as he spoke, pointing out several key locations on the map. You'll be the chief commander for this battle, Champion Santos, Caspian said to Dax. No, Lord Caspian. The chief commander can be no one but you. I'll just be the deputy commander, Dax said somewhat fearfully. Don't refuse the position. This is West Aridlands, which is your territory. Also, most of the people here are your subordinates, so you can deploy them more effectively than me, Caspian said indifferently. You're the Diaturanian god of war, Lord Caspian. Everyone will surely listen to you if you're to be the chief commander. I'll just support you from the side, Dax said respectfully. He respected Caspian from the bottom of his heart. He would not be listening to Caspian's orders otherwise. Let's do it this way. You'll be chief commander in name, but I'll command in secret. You can pass the power back to me when the king officially reinstates me to my original position, Caspian said without mincing his words. In the capital of Filren, Byron was caught in a dilemma. They had announced an attack aimed at Diatoran, but nothing had been done in the past 2 days. This had enraged many Filrenian soldiers. Filren was flooded by complaints aimed at Byron at this moment. Great news, Your Majesty! Jason shouted excitedly. Jason was usually a stoic man. For him to be so excited, there had to be really great news. That made Byron feel thrilled in turn. What great news? Tell me now, Byron demanded. We've successfully gotten our hands on a set of communication equipment that belonged to the Diaturanian authorities, and we've also cracked the code to them. Jason was trembling in excitement. Did it come from a reliable source? Byron asked, somewhat in disbelief. It's reliable, as proven by various parties, Jason answered. Would the encrypted code used by Diatoran really be so easy to crack? Byron asked. Our intelligence department spent a lot of effort on it. We also invested a lot of money in this department so that they could decrypt codes more easily. The intel we acquire through these methods is really helpful when in battle, Jason explained. That's great! We must eavesdrop on Diatoran every day through this equipment so that we can gain useful information that will aid us in battle. Byron believed wholeheartedly in Jason's words now. If they could learn about Diatoran's plans in advance, they need not worry that they would be helpless against the Diaturanian troops. Locked in a cell in Dord City prison, Jerry was slumped on the ground. He looked defeated and completely disheveled. After the fall of his family, Jerry was imprisoned. Zane had become a wanted criminal as well. The king made the news of the Andrews family's rebellion public, which answered a lot of questions. Many people wondered why Diatoran had been meek in the face of various threats, but now it was evident that it had been a result of the Andrews family's meddling. Caspian was still formulating strategies when Dax walked over to him, asking, Will Filren launch a sudden attack against us, Lord Caspian? Before Caspian could respond, someone from the intelligence department ran over. He reported to Caspian, Rocket cars from the enemy side are rapidly approaching us, sir. There are only 20 miles between us. They surely moved all of a sudden because they want to launch a sneak attack against us, Caspian said calmly. Only after hearing Caspian's words did Dax come to realize how big the disparity between him and Caspian was. Champion Santos, deploy the Special Forces unit to destroy those rocket cars immediately, Caspian ordered. Yes, Lord Caspian. Dax returned to the command center immediately. Meanwhile, Caspian stood on the hill and watched the stars in the sky. After taking in some fresh air, he entered the command center as well. He gave Dax an order. Champion Santos, give me a squad of 10,000 elite soldiers. Also, tell the reporters in Dord City to come here. Dax did not know why Caspian was doing this, but he carried out Caspian's orders anyway. He asked, Who's going to command this squad, Lord Caspian? I am, Caspian said determinedly. Dax was shocked. He said in alarm, You're the chief commander, Lord Caspian. How could you put yourself in such a risky situation? You're the chief commander, not me. I'm leading this squad of elite soldiers into the capital of Filren, Caspian said, nonchalant. Dax said in surprise, "This is too dangerous, Lord Caspian." Caspian said, "In order to defeat a country, we must first seize its king. With this, we can decrease the number of casualties on our side." "All right then," Dax nodded. If Caspian had made his decision, who was he to object to it? Chapter 818. Darren emerges from the mountains. Many Estrian ships appeared out at sea. They lay in wait, seemingly harboring certain intentions. Cath, the champion of East Aradlands, reported the existence of those enemy ships to Caspian immediately. Caspian was not surprised at all. It seemed that he had already anticipated it. "Deal with them immediately. We can't sit and wait for them to attack us," Caspian said. "That's an impressive fleet which should not be underestimated, Lord Caspian." "Isn't it dangerous if we engage in confrontation with the enemy now?" Cath said in worry. "They're just helping Jason, so they probably won't attack us directly. Just do as I say," Caspian said. He had anticipated that other forces would try to take advantage of their situation, as this was not the first time this had happened. Many martial artists honed their techniques on Mount Calum, the most dangerous and steepest mountain in Diatoran. It was rumored that some had achieved immortality here, but no one had met those who had reportedly succeeded in doing so. A man wearing training clothes came out from a cave atop the mountain. He looked up at the expansive sky and said vindictively, "Caspian Lynch, I, Darren Everett, have reached a whole new level. You'll surely meet your demise." Darren leaped down from the top of the mountain, weaving between cliffs and mountain walls as if he were flying. Darren had finally mastered the Black Moon technique after practicing in seclusion for half a month. He had also become a grandmaster. He was confident that he could defeat Caspian. Darren had no idea about the massive changes that had happened to Diatoran. He planned to kill Caspian and curry Jerry's favor, so as to heighten his status in Skyark Palace. Darren wrapped his blade named Black Moon up, and walked over to the foot of the mountain where he hailed a taxi. "Ah, you look striking, sir. Are you training in the mountains or something?" The taxi driver laughed at Darren. "The airport," Darren said coldly. "You have an imposing air around you, sir. Are you a martial artist secluded in the mountains? You seem powerful, but you also look a bit disheveled. It's been a long time since you last took a shower, hasn't it?" The driver scrutinized Darren again. He suddenly had the feeling that something was not right. Why would this middle-aged man dress up as a traditional martial artist in the middle of nowhere? Could he possibly have a developmental problem? "I just remembered that I have to fill up the car with gas. Maybe you should get another taxi?" The driver hastily found an excuse. Darren gave the driver a sharp look which startled him. He felt like Darren would surely give him a nasty beating if he refused to drive Darren to the airport. He grimaced awkwardly. "It's fine, there are gas stations everywhere anyway. I'll refuel the tank when we run short." "Is Jerry Andrews the king of Diatoran now?" Darren asked. A lot of things must have happened when he had been secluded in the mountains. Darren guessed that Jerry would be the king by now. "Huh? Were you secluded from the outside world? Jerry is in prison now," and Kelvin exploded into dust. The Andrews family was completely busted. "What? Kelvin died in an explosion?" Darren asked in shock. "Yes, sir. I didn't expect you to not have the slightest idea. The airport is still undergoing repairs, so we'll have to take a detour." The driver unlocked his phone. He also glanced at the wanted notices put up by the authorities of Diatoran while at it. The first criminal wanted was Zane, and a reward of $1 million was offered. The second criminal was Darren, with a reward of $800,000. The driver looked at the two photos, fearing that he would fail to recognize these two men. He would be rewarded several $100,000 if he was able to provide the authorities with information on their whereabouts after all. That would be excellent. At this moment, he suddenly came to a serious realization. The passenger currently in his taxi seemed to be Darren himself. He was excited and scared in equal measure. He took advantage of this moment when Darren was not paying any attention to him and pressed a button on the screen. He sent the details of his taxi to the Inspector General's office immediately. "We're going somewhere else now," Darren said. Going to the airport now would be pointless. The driver dared not go against what Darren wanted, so he could only do as he asked. Byron sat in the car, with Jason and Kinolm beside him. "I have this constant feeling that something's not right, Your Majesty. You should stay in the capital. You'll be safer that way," Jason said in worry. "Why are you so paranoid about everything, Jason? Haven't we already gotten our hands on the newest intel?" Byron sounded displeased. They learned through the intel that things were chaotic on the enemy's side, which put Filren at an advantage. For them, this was an opportunity that only came once in a blue moon. It was 2:00 a.m., and Mount Dre Solaris was quiet. Suddenly, many fireballs appeared in the sky, making it look as bright as it was during daytime. Caspian had anticipated that Jason's subordinates would retaliate. Thankfully, Sylvia's side was already prepared. Sylvia dared not treat the situation carelessly, though. She knew that Jason's troops were not to be underestimated. When the two troops met, Sylvia had to play all the trump cards she held in her hands. Sylvia ordered everyone to retreat until they were behind Mount Dre Solaris. Jason's subordinate, who was commanding the troops, felt gleeful when he saw Sylvia's troops retreat. He had anticipated a bloody battle, but the enemy troops had unexpectedly retreated. They were unable to take even one hit. Vidysia had also sent troops to aid Jason. At this key moment, Balthazar held a global news conference, announcing Caspian's reinstatement. Caspian was now the Diaturanian god of war once again, and he would be the chief commander for this battle. Everyone in the world was shocked. Willow, Sherry, and Logan were all happy for Caspian after his reinstatement. The Diaturanian god of war, whom they respected and loved, would be going to war again. Comparatively, the Stuarts were not as enthused. They were unhappy even. Jason's troops did not stop and constantly adjusted their plans along the way. Surprisingly, they encountered no obstacles on the way, confusing them. Was West Eredlands really left unguarded? Jason's troops dared not treat this situation carelessly, as this was their first coming across something like this. No one knew what Sylvia and Dax were planning. They could only tread along blindly, completely oblivious to the fact that they had entered Caspian's trap. Caspian had planned everything before his departure. He wanted to pull Jason's troops into his trap step by step. After that, he would defeat them in one strike and silence them once and for all. Chapter 819 Invasion. A huge fleet of battleships gathered at the Eastern Sea. The Estrian army was apprehensive upon seeing that, of course. They had never intended to engage in a confrontation against Diatoran to the end. They dared not confront Sylvia directly. They just wanted to benefit from the situation, even if it was just slightly. This was why they ordered a retreat immediately. Although they were here to assist Jason's troops, there was no need for them to give it their all. They just needed to put up a show of doing it. They did not expect Sylvia's troops to pursue them hotly, having no plans to withdraw from the battle at all. The men aboard the surveillance aircraft making its rounds mid-air saw something very bizarre. The jets belonging to Sylvia's side were all parked at the tarmac by the shore, left unused. This strange scene was quite confusing. The next moment, the enemy commander received a warning through a radar signal. It confounded him. He asked, "What on earth is happening?" His deputy general was dumbfounded as well, because many fighter jets suddenly appeared mid-air around them. The jets parked by the shore seemed to be part of a trap. At this moment, something else happened all of a sudden. Caspian started a live stream that was released simultaneously in every country in the world. On screen, Caspian looked exceptionally imposing. More shockingly, he was not in South Lake City but in the capital of another country. Behind him was the landmark of Filren, the clock tower. It seemed that he had entered the capital and had Byron's residence under control. Jason's allies were terrified. They had wanted to fight Diatoran alongside Jason so as to gain some benefits in exchange. However, no one had any idea about the massive disparity between both sides. Even Byron's residence was under Caspian's control now. How embarrassing! They had no idea when Caspian had snuck into the enemy's territory either. Those powers who had wanted to take advantage of Diatoran's situation were all at a loss for what to do. Reality was cruel, and they wanted nothing more but to extricate themselves from the center of the whirlpool. The other powers no longer had the audacity to support Jason's troops, either not when they knew how powerful Diatoran was. If they ended up getting involved, they would lose more than they had gained. Jason was the most enraged one of all. He had been gleeful, assuming that he would win the war. He was oblivious to the fact that the enemy had invaded the capital of Filren. "Retreat immediately! We must regain control over our capital," Byron ordered angrily. What Jason was most worried would happen was already happening. "Caspian is basically walking to his own death by doing something so risky, Your Majesty. I'm sure that he only has a small number of soldiers with him. We can lock him within the capital and capture him when it's the right time to do so," Jason said. "Jason, the capital is our center and baseline. Now that it's occupied by Caspian, the soldiers and generals will suffer from low morale. We must take it back," Byron said, ignoring Jason's words. This was the second time Caspian appeared in his territory, which humiliated Byron deeply. He had to regain control over the capital, for the sake of his dignity. Just as Jason's troops were ready to retreat, the soldiers hiding at the foot of Mount Dracelaris charged over. There were hundreds of thousands of them. Jason's troops were all dumbfounded. How were the Diaturanian troops still unscathed despite the rounds upon rounds of attacks they had launched? Jason knew that he was incapable of convincing Byron. Instead of doing that, he formulated a backup plan. He took 200 soldiers with him and retreated somewhere else. In Jason's opinion, his troops no longer had the advantage. If the capital ended up being completely taken down by Diatoran, at least he would still have a last resort he could make use of. Byron was very confident now, as he thought that Caspian was giving him an opening by invading the capital with only a few soldiers. He thought he would succeed in capturing Caspian as long as he returned to the capital with his subordinates. However, more bad news came. A city by the shore, originally occupied by Jason's troops, was under serious attack. Most of the city had been turned into a wasteland. Byron could never fathom when the enemy had carried out an attack of such scale, as he had gotten no intel about it. The news about the retreat of his other allied forces also made Byron feel helpless. At the same time, he was filled with rage. He would surely make these other forces pay after the end of this war. All alliances were born because of the benefits their members could gain. Of course, no one would take any risks when they had nothing to gain from it. Caspian had turned Byron's residence into his main base. Jason's troops were already insecure to start with. They would surely be filled with panic now that their home turf had been invaded. Byron and Kelvin rushed back to the capital with 50,000 soldiers. They were followed by several 100,000 soldiers due to the severity of the situation. After occupying Byron's residence, Caspian had his men dig a secret tunnel that would make it possible for them to leave quietly and arrive at the mountains nearby. On the way to the capital, Byron was almost killed. He would be dead if not for Kelvin, who took the bullet in his place. Byron was furious. He ordered his driver to stop on the road, and he exited the car yelling, "Bastards! They're using these unscrupulous methods again. Is assassination the only method you can think of?" Just as he said that, a guard positioned himself in front of Byron. He was killed immediately after, his blood splattering on Byron's face. Byron was rooted on the spot, consumed by fear. He felt as if the god of death was right next to him. During the few seconds he stood there, totally stunned, his guards dragged him back into the car. Kelvin yelled, "Pinpoint the sniper immediately." This could be done by inferring the location of the sniper through the trajectory of the bullet. Kelvin ordered the driver to drive forward at full speed and to not stop the car no matter what. After they were on the road for a while, they drove past a massive hole someone had dug in the road. Byron sat in the car feeling aggrieved, but he dared not say anything about it, as he did not know if there were more snipers out there with their weapons trained at him. They should be able to arrive at the capital after 5 hours, but they encountered obstacles on their way back. The person who had set those obstacles was naturally Macy. She had assigned some people to create them on the way to the capital, so as to stop Byron from returning on time. This was done to buy Caspian more time. The situation right now was to Caspian's advantage. Jason's troops were under fire, and many cities were now wastelands. It was obvious that Diatoran had the upper hand. Jason's troops were met with continuous losses when they were already suffering from low morale to start with. In addition, their jets were seriously damaged. They had thought that they could achieve an easy victory after formulating plans based on the intel they had gotten their hands on. However, the intel ended up deterring them instead. As more and more bad news was conveyed to him, the commander of the intelligence department under Jason's troops was ready to end his life. He had not anticipated that all the intel he had decoded would be fake. Now, he finally realized that he had been tricked. Chapter 820, Secret Escape. As the fighter jets circled around in the air above him, the intelligence officer was filled with terror. Feeling like he had disappointed the king of Filran, he ended his life with a handgun. Compared to Filran, which was flooded by desolation, Diatoran was alight with cheer. Many big cities in Diatoran were broadcasting the wartime news in real time on massive screens. The Diatoranians walked out of their homes and partied on the streets. They shouted Caspian's name on the top of their lungs. In their hearts, Caspian was undoubtedly the god of war himself. The enemy troops are in great disorder. The king of Filran is attempting to retreat back to the capital with his subordinates, but the process hasn't been smooth. A reporter described the newest developments from the front lines. On the big screen, Filrinian soldiers were running away in all directions. The king of Philern said that they wanted Diatoran to compensate them with $40 trillion and also cede parts of our territory to them. But that's a total joke at this point, the reporter said sarcastically, breaking away from the solemn tone they had been using. The king of Philern had also proclaimed that Diatoran would be turned into a living hell, but it seemed that the opposite was happening. The Diatoranians hated Jerry wholeheartedly. If not for him, Diatoran would have achieved victory long ago. The Diatoranian god of war, who has never lost a single battle, is currently inside the king of Philern's residence, the reporter said enthusiastically. The news excited everyone, but more people started to worry for Caspian. Although the Philrenian troops were losing, there were still 100,000 soldiers in their midst. Caspian, on the other hand, only had 10,000 soldiers with him. When such a big disparity existed between the two sides, Caspian was still in some amount of danger. Everyone was cheering and shouting, save for an old man who looked extremely displeased. He said, "The next time I see you, Caspian, it'll be time for you to die." The old man was actually Darren in disguise. He had planned to head to South Lake City, where he would kill Caspian. However, he could only return to Skyark Palace after learning that Caspian was not here. However, the headquarters of Skyark Palace was a total mess when he returned, which enraged him. All the people in Skyark Palace had been murdered too. And no one was capable of that save for Caspian. Even Raging Blade, the organization Darren had spent half his life on, was nothing but a wasteland now. Darren swore in secret that he had to kill Caspian and avenge his subordinates. Just as he was in deep contemplation, he suddenly heard a volley of gunshots. It seemed that the people from the Inspector General's office had been waiting for him in Raging Blade's headquarters for a long time. Darren unsheathed Black Moon and parried the bullets flying toward him from all directions with it. He had improved his skills so much that he was now capable of blocking those bullets. The office knew that Darren was powerful, so they had sent a lot of people here when they got wind of his whereabouts. They had thought that Darren would end up being buried under gunfire. But what happened in the end was out of their expectations. Darren was so powerful to the extent that he stayed invincible despite having only a blade with him. The people from the office had yet to be anxious though. They had an advantage in terms of manpower. They had enough men present to wear Darren down eventually. Darren had no intention to waste more time here. He slashed his hefty blade in the air forcefully, creating a powerful force laced with murderous intent so potent that the men from the office felt it. The next second, dozens of men were sent flying by said force, and Darren vanished from the hall. The men from the office were shell-shocked. Was Darren still human at this point? When Darren learned that Caspian had invaded the depths of Philern with only 10,000 soldiers, he was shocked. Despite the feud between him and Caspian, he admired Caspian's courage. He stood in the crowd, wearing an expression of glee. The next moment he disappeared in the midst of the throng. He intended to head to Philern where he would kill Caspian under the gazes of everyone else. He was almost eager to experience the euphoria that would come from doing it. Byron, together with what remained of his troops, finally managed to enter the capital of Philern after countless obstacles. He had encountered several waves of attacks on the way here. When Caspian learned that Byron was returning with his troops, he got ready to retreat. He would never face Byron directly with only 10,000 soldiers by his side. On the other end, Sylvia pursued the enemy troops and attacked them forcefully in an attempt to buy Caspian more time. Things were difficult on Caspian's side. Byron had also made the decision to cut off all communication equipment in his residence and block all electronic signals from around his residence. This resulted in the complete isolation of Caspian and his 10,000 soldiers. Balthazar was waiting for Caspian to contact him in his residence. He could contact Caspian before, but not now. He was panicking when he got news that Caspian could no longer communicate with anyone outside. Caspian had not told Balthazar about his plans to retreat. When communication was first lost, Balthazar was still feeling assured as he was confident that Caspian would be fine. Caspian had not lost a single war before during his long reign as the Diatoranian god of war. However, as more time passed, Balthazar started to feel anxious. He had this feeling that Caspian wanted to sacrifice himself for the sake of victory. This thought reverberated in Balthazar's mind constantly. For him, Caspian was way more important than one victory. After all communication was lost for 12 hours, Balthazar could not take it anymore. He opted to contact Byron. He asked for peace talks to be held, and for Byron to not injure Caspian in any way. Byron did not expect Balthazar to propose a peace talk. Of course, he would not let Caspian leave unscathed. Caspian was a massive threat to Filren. One would know how important Caspian was just by seeing how anxious Balthazar was. Byron pretended to agree to peace talks, which would only be held after the Diaturanian troops had retreated. Balthazar was not stupid. Of course he would not be fooled by Byron. Also, Diatoran soldiers in its army now, which was enough to intimidate Filren. Balthazar gave Dax an order. Dax was to occupy the capital of Filren and rescue Caspian no matter what. Byron dared not treat this frivolously. He deployed 100,000 soldiers to surround and kill Caspian. The cannons fired for several hours, and suddenly, there was nothing but silence. Byron was cautious in the beginning. Half an hour later he charged into the residence with his troops, only to discover that no one was there. More than 10,000 soldiers had disappeared just like that. Byron ordered a thorough search. Kenelm got a whiff of an acrid odor when searching one of the rooms. He shouted, "Oh no! Tons of explosives are stored here!" He quickly dashed out of the residence, pulling Byron with him. The moment they were outside the residence, a deafening explosion happened behind them. All the soldiers who did not manage to leave on time exploded into dust. Even Byron was sent flying by the powerful waves of the explosion.